airbag, no ABS, no traction control, and all in a car weighing just over a ton with 406 horsepower. At the time the Sagaris was launched in 2005, ABS at least was supposed to be mandatory. When Peter Wheeler, who ran the company at the time, was asked about this, he just said, well, we never got the memo. Similarly, he justified no traction control and no airbag by saying that it would make drivers overconfident and more likely to crash. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the way it drives in a moment, but first, let's go through because I want to show you some of the crazy details on this car. And just so you know, Sagaris is the Greek word for a lightweight battle axe used by Persians. Very, very apt, I think. So the first thing is that bizarrely, the roof is actually higher on one side than the other. Now it does seem a bit mental, but there is a reason for it. If you go on track, you need a helmet. Therefore, on the driver's side, they have given it a bit more room. But also, crazily, for the European left-hand drive cars, they just didn't bother with that and they put a completely flat roof in. Many cars make a design feature out of their exhausts, but how many have you seen that exit out the sides? They originally designed it so it would have functional vents to air out the wheel arches, but they discovered that that was flinging loads of dirt and stones onto the screen. So they just blanked them off. And I think that makes it look even better. It's almost as if these are sort of dorsal fins on the bonnet. And who else do you know who would make a transparent rear spoiler? And just look at the angle of it and these absolutely beautiful brackets. Inside, this is pretty much as well built as you will get in a TVR, and it has some really interesting things. To open the doors, there's no handles, there's just a little button, and if you think about it, that makes perfect sense, because if you have central locking already, what's the point of having the extra weight, cost and complexity of door handles? I do hope, though, you can still get out. If the battery goes dead or something like that, there must be a little override somewhere. Then you have some even crazier stuff. They did put an ashtray in it, but it's in here. So I don't know how on earth you were supposed to actually use it. What was the point of that? All in all, a crazy car, but let's see how it actually drives. Daniel Boardman was the chief engineer on this project, and he was not a fan of the typical TVR traits, which was spiky on the limit handling and poor quality. So from the start, the Sagaris was engineered to dial out bump steer. The suspension, i.e. the dampers, they were developed in conjunction with Bilstein, and the whole car was put together better than any TVR that came before it. The interior is a mix of the delectable with the slightly nonsensical, so you have lovely milled aluminium knobs, you have that incredible short stubby gear change, an aluminium handbrake, leather covering everything, and it does feel more solid than in cars that have come before this. But at the same time, you have ergonomics that are maybe a little bit iffy, and that stuff, as good as it looks with the array of LEDs covering it as well, is a little bit bewildering for someone who hasn't been in here before. As if the interior wasn't crazy enough on its own, the startup procedure is also something to behold. Now, it is a little bit cramped in here, but still, this is a surprisingly practical car. If you look at the size of the boot, for example, you'd have no problem going away for the weekend with a couple of suitcases. It is based on the T350, so it has the traditional recipe of a steel tube chassis with a fiberglass body. That in turn means that they were able to achieve an incredibly light weight of just 1,065 kilos. That meant 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds, which is mental. Although there is a little bit of a cheat here. First gear is so long that to get to 60, you don't need to change up. So the 0 to 60 is done in first gear. So the engine, the Speed 6, is a 4-litre producing 406 horsepower, but most of them at some point have gone pop, including this. When it was rebuilt by TVR Power, Martin, the owner, decided to opt for the upgrade to 4.5 litres. That makes it generally more drivable, but it also gives it another 50 horsepower. So let's see how it feels going down the road. Okay, that wasn't foot to the floor because although it's been used recently, Martin told me to wait until there was at least a couple of notches on the oil temperature, and it's not quite there, so I didn't go too mad. We will do another run where I take it up through the gears. But even then, and I think that was maybe 70%, it feels like it's a serious weapon. Now, it's a little bit of a shame that the original car, developed with those Bilsteins, is actually very well suspended, but when one of them started leaking, Martin put on some nitrons, and they are a little bit too stiff for the road. Still, it feels like a very well sorted car. If you know TVRs and you drive a Sagaris, I think that one of the main things that you'll notice is that there is less disconnect between the front and the back ends of the car. Having said that, it's still a car that you need to respect. The steering, the speed has been reduced from 1.7 turns lock to lock to 2. So it makes it slightly less nervous than some of the previous cars, especially the Tuscan. But at 2 turns lock to lock, it is still incredibly direct. The brakes, I have to say, are one of these cars' best features. They have, you press the pedal, there's a little bit of initial travel, then it just goes solid, but they're so easy to modulate. They give you back so much feedback as well. Okay, we're up to temperature on the oil as well, so we're now going to take it through the gears properly. I can't wait. That Speed 6, it just sounds so incredibly ferocious. Now, steering lock is supposed to be pretty bad, and it isn't great, but the car is so small that it's not as much of an issue as it might be. So I think on the other run that wasn't even 70% because the throttle has got such a long travel that it's just quite unnatural how far down you have to push it. I guess that is the TVR natural traction control. Now, it is better behaved than the earlier cars, but make no mistake, this is quite a still edgy driving thing. So I think the suspension isn't doing it any favours. It just moves all over the road. The nitron shocks are maybe better suited to the track. The front end is notably calmed down from a Tuscan. To me, it doesn't feel that much better than on a T350, but overall, it's still a great package, and the progressive weighing of the steering as you go in and out of corners is a thing to behold. Just then, it also feels like it's very neutral in its cornering attitudes as well. I don't know about you, but I think these look sensational. They're not typically pretty, of course, but the detailing that I showed you earlier, plus the overall look, it's simply something that can't be matched. I was talking to Martin earlier, and for the kind of money that these fetch now, which is around the 70, 80, 90,000 pounds, you could get yourself a McLaren MP4, which is, without question, a much better car in every measurable way. But having to pick between the two, I think I would probably still go for this mental thing, the Sagaris, because it's about its presence, the way it looks, the way it feels. It's something you'll never get bored of. I'd love an MP4 as well. And it's quite easy to sharpen them up and make them a little bit more entertaining, which is what I think they were criticised for. But this is just such a unique proposition. Apart from the nitrons, this car is pretty much standard. The exhaust has been decatted, but apart from that, it hasn't been changed. And for me, there's maybe a little bit too much snap, crackle, and pop. But it has a fierceness to the way it sounds, an agricultural, race-like nature, which you can't take away from these engines. The suspension really is too stiff. You can feel that it's quality damping, but on bumpy roads, it doesn't, it just moves the car around too much. Let's do one final run through the gears before I give you my conclusion. And that was the best yet. I've got big feet and they keep on getting stuck and stopping me pressing the pedal all the way down. So I think I will agree that this is the best built TVR yet, but make no mistake, it's still a car that demands respect. For example, if I was to describe the Tuscan as a starving leopard which is constantly on edge and ready to spring, then that would make for me the Sagaris more like a well-fed lion. Less likely to attack, but you wouldn't really want to provoke it. Now, I've covered most of the modern range of TVRs up till now. I've got a Tamora coming soon, but I would love to do a Typhon. So if you know of anyone who has one, or you have one and you're interested, please get in touch with me and let's try and arrange a review of that as well. Thank you so much to Martin for bringing it down. Thank you to all of you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you for the next video.